I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Tico Poulakakis, cinematographer on the acclaimed sci-fi epic Foundation. Tico, you have worked with some beautifully lensed series like American Gods and so forth, and I think that Foundation is probably the most epic, ambitious project that you've had such a critical role in bringing to life to date. Would you say that's a pretty accurate statement?
Yes, I think I probably would. Yes.
What did you make of it when you first signed on? That everyone talks about how Isaac Asimov's novels were unfilmable and unadaptable, even that's a word. What did you make of it when you signed on? Did you think this was going to be a real significant challenge for you?
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, I had obviously the advantage of having read the first couple episodes, so I sort of saw where David Goyer was going with it. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of famously unadaptable and unfilmable. But I mean, having read those scripts, I was sort of like, oh, well, this is interesting. This could be really cool. Even then, on the page, the scope and the scope, the scope and the scale of it were rather huge. So, I mean, it was both terrifying and exciting to sort of read. So, yeah, I think both those things, the fact that it was such a big thing and both terrifying and exciting is what made me sign on.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. Like it shows that you're willing to, take a chance and to really test yourself. For people who haven't seen it, the Foundation is so ambitious and epic in scope as it chronicles this 1,000-year saga of the Galactic Empire in decline across civilizations, and it's huge. And there's a lot of space set shows on these days, but I think this one I just tops them all, in my opinion. How would you describe the visual aesthetic of the show from your perspective as DP?
Well, one thing is, like with space shows, and especially with a lot of modern lighting technology, there's the ability to kind of do anything in any color. Now, again, with boards and LEDs and all this kind of stuff that you can build into the set design, you have all these crazy options available to you. But in conversations with, obviously, the production designer, the phenomenal Rory Shane, and with David Goyer and director Alex Graves, we kind of leaned into a bit more, as much as we could, lean into a bit of naturalism, or tried to keep it somewhat less, I don't know how to spacey in a way, try to ground it in some kind of visual reality. Yeah. Because it's easy enough to get excited and let it get away from you, and suddenly you've got all these crazy colors and all these crazy lights doing crazy things. And part of it was not wanting to be a visual distraction, obviously, and part of it was trying to ground that epic story into a kind of approach, to some degree at least, lighting wise.
Yeah, I found Foundation to be really tactile. It felt a little rough around the edges in some scenes, and of course in Trantor it's glorious and smooth and shiny. How much of the effects, not the effects, the visuals that you are bringing to life, purely CGI and in camera? Like, how much do you have to work with the visual effects team to make the show look the way it does?
Yeah, phenomenal. I mean, we had the advantage, obviously, of not working with a lot of, believe it or not, blue or green screen stages. We didn't use any, or very sparingly used, an LED wall. We were often in real sets or in real locations. So the biggest issue posed, I think, beyond the pure CG, which some of which was fantastic, was literally blending those real environments into a planetary environment, let's say, or a continuation of a world. So those were the big sort of challenges. We had a very talented team and a very accommodating team, and sometimes, so accommodating that it even made me go, oh, wow, this is, I could get used to this. So they were pretty generous, especially with a lot of our mistakes, and they made it look amazing. So kudos to them.
Yeah. Working with David Goyer and Alex Graves, and I mean, there's a whole bunch of directors on this show, but for you specifically, they are renowned for their particular creative vision in their previous work, and in particular in this genre. What did you most value about working with them both in particular, and how did it make you better as a DP?
Well, starting with David, I mean, he's exceedingly generous as a showrunner and exceedingly collaborative. So he was open to, well, there goes the sun, sorry. He's open to a lot of ideas. And,
yeah, it happens.
And he was willing to sort of play around with a lot of visual ideas, and he was really open to exploring and taking chances, which is great, because you want to be able to fail and sort of say, okay, we're going to try this. It's insane. Let's do it. And 9 times out of 10, if you get your ducks in a row, it works out really well. Sometimes, you're like, well, it could have been better. But he was very generous to allow us to sort of play that way, which was great. And then, with Alex, he's so concise in how he does his episodes, and he's sort of so clever in his transitions and so well structured as a director that it really makes my job easy, because I know what we're going to do, I know how we're going to do it, and it allows me that freedom of being able to pre-plan and sort of be pretty sure that that's the way it's going to be. So it gives you a leg up in prep, in the sense that when you get there, you can execute your ideas with ease. So that was, a big plus for me. It made my life very easy and enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm sure it did, because it's hard enough getting this stuff done, but it's good to have the leaders on set facilitating that. So there are 7 DPs that were working on this huge production in season 1. You're responsible for shooting 3 episodes, correct me if I'm wrong, 2, 4, and 5. 3, 4, and 5. So firstly, is it challenging, or what's it like to work alongside other DPs to collectively bring the show to life with some kind of consistency in the look and feel throughout the whole season?
Yeah, I think that feel is the operative word, because I think all of us, every DP recognizes that you can definitely sort of pay an homage to a style, but no 2 DPs will ever shoot the same frame the same way. So, I mean, it got a little crazy in the fog of war. I was sort of said this before to a couple of people, where we're just literally passing each other in the hallway going, "Oh, what'd you do over there?" And it's like, "I shot it like this." And then we just be running off to different sets. But the sort of overriding idea was that, look, it's not going to, of course, look the same, but it's got to have the same feel, which is, I don't know how you really even quantify that thing, but I think that we sort of succeeded in a large degree. Now, it's also very forgiving, because and a lot of fun, because you get to another planet or you get to another ship, and suddenly you can take it in another direction. So there's a lot of leeway and a lot of freedom creatively that way from the lighting perspective. But I think everybody did have a good ability to make it feel the same. And then again, kudos go to our final colorist, Tony Dustin, who pulled it all together and kind of gave it shape, where maybe it might have been rough a little bit around the edges, but
yeah.
What
was the reason behind giving each cinematographer a chunk of the season to film it in that way?
I think it was purely logistics. Like, it was just, it was so big, so sprawling. I mean, we were in so many countries, sometimes virtually during COVID, that it just there was no way logistically to not do that. So it was just how it sort of worked out. And it was great. Like, it was so much fun to work with other DPs, because you sort of you see what they do and you're like, oh my God, that's a great idea. I never would have thought of that. And it takes you in a different direction. So it's a lovely kind of problem to have.
Yeah, true. And you get to learn a lot from your colleagues. A lot of the external shots that you created for Terminus, I think I recall were shot on Fuerteventura in the Canaries. And to me, they feature these really colder, desaturated, muted tones that evoke this real sense of remoteness that we're supposed to elicit from Terminus. Talk us through the choices made in lensing those scenes.
Well, a lot of times, that's right. It wanted to feel cold and expansive. So obviously for a lot of the establishing shots, we're leaning into a lot of wide lenses and using a lot of the landscape, some real, some created and augmented, but mostly real. And then, it becomes like the sort of a bit of the Lawrence of Arabia model. You show the world, and then you get into the story with the people. I know Alex, the director I worked with, mostly was of that school. Like, he'd like to kind of show the context of what was happening, and then really get into the story with the people. So there's a lot of wide lenses, and then just kind of getting in tight to be with what happens and how. So
yeah, It really comes across. It's beautiful. In fact, I would never have guessed that would have been the Canaries. It's not how I imagine or picture the Canary Islands to look like.
Oh, cool.
Um,
Well, it was supposed to be Iceland, but that became too logistically difficult because they started the pilot in Iceland. And then it was
yeah,
just between the cold and just the logistics of shooting there, we moved to the Canaries and tried to
yeah,
kind of lean into that as a kind of frozen world. So if it worked,
yeah, right.
I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah. What about the scenes where Gail flashes back to her upbringing on Synax? Because like the Synax shots, like the everything about Synax just blew my mind. The costumes, the way that it was designed, the coloring. What was the most challenging aspect of making Synax look as beautiful as it did?
Um, well, I'm glad you thought it looked beautiful. First of all, that's great. Yeah, there was a few challenges. I mean, there was some real sets, which were great that again, Rory designed and were really cool. So we shot a lot of interiors on stage. A lot of the exteriors were shot, especially for the stuff on the water, were shot in Malta on their very huge water tank there. So that, being on the coast of the Mediterranean in January posed some of its own logistical challenges with wind and rain and whatever, but it was good fun. And then we actually did a whole virtual shoot where some of the backgrounds are in Germany. So we were supposed to go to Germany. There's a village that looks very similar and that we sort of, in a way, copied as part of the production design. But we couldn't get to Germany because of COVID. So we had a team there shooting plates for traveling people and people coming and going. And then we would literally shoot the people walking. We ended up shooting them in Malta and comping them into that background. And I thought actually really well done by, again, the VFX department, because you don't really notice it. So yeah, we shot really over 3-4 countries, the Synax was. So yeah, but I'm glad it came together.
And then, of course, the scenes in Trantor, particularly the like inside scenes, they could have just been run of the mill, scenes in the royal court, fantastic, great, you can light it in a certain way. But I found them to be really compelling. I could be wrong, I'm a layperson, but the lighting was lower than expected and it felt more mysterious and inexplicably to me. Can you talk us through what you were trying to achieve on the internal Trantor scenes?
Yeah. Oh, for my part, I mean, Trantor, the story is literally about an empire in decline. So, in my mind, visually, it was kind of always sunset. So there was a lot of it's like the sun's going down on the empire. So I was trying to lean into that both color-wise and light-wise. And then I think keeping things a little bit on the darker side also, sort of plays to the subconscious of the viewer, because if you can't see all the way into what's going on, or if things are just a little misty and dim, then you get the sense that there's something that you don't quite understand going on in the background, which is sort of, that there's layers to this empire and the craziness of these freaky clone emperors. And so that was the whole idea, sort of make it a somewhat mysterious sort of Twilight kind of place to sort of reflect, I was hoping anyway, that aspect of the story.
Yeah. When I look at the work done on Foundation, I immediately it evoked reminders about other work in feature films like Greg Fraser's work in Dune and John Seale's work in Mad Max Fury Road. Coincidentally, 2 Aussie cinematographers. There seem to be so many good Aussie cinematographers. There really are. What are you inspired by when you look at other DPs' work over the last 15, 20 years in features and TVs? Do you pay much attention to what other people are doing?
Yeah, the first thing, again, if you talk about somebody like the amazing Greg Fraser, who I think, maybe the new, the new sort of vanguard of the great cinematographer. He's a great example of, and his work, especially in sci-fi, is a really fantastic example of, I think, that same sort of naturalism. It isn't flashy, it isn't whatever, it leans into the story and evokes the right kind of feeling. And obviously he's a master at that, I think. And even if you look at something like the Batman, where he's gone about as far as anybody could go, and kudos to him as well, because that's a lot of bravery. But yeah, that sort of thing, I think I look for cinematographers that make me feel something, and then I think from there I try to pick them apart technically and see how they did it, and try to do my own pale imitation here and there of what they've done.
I wouldn't say pale, but yes, I agree. Like I think the cinematographer gets a lot of credit from people who maybe aren't fully informed about the filmmaking process, because it's something that we can see, we feel, we experience these beautiful images, landscapes and external shots. But it's always those the shots inside, or the ones where you're shooting dialogue scenes that we don't really tend to notice. I'm wondering if you can point to a scene like that where it may be super nuanced, and yet you were really proud of the way that it was shot and the way that it propelled the narrative forward.
But I think Synax is an example, I guess, of that. I liked what we did there. You know what I mean? In the sense that I liked, I sort of liked the feeling that it had, like it felt right. And again, I keep going back to that because that's sort of, I think 90% of the way I like to work. It's like, if I look at it and it feels right, then that's the way I'm going to go. And I was happy with how that all sort of came together. For sure. Again, having been shot in so many different places. Yeah. So that I felt like we got somewhere. And then there was a little piece that we did for when they go to the Maiden, which is like, we see the Maiden, the planet, for the first time. And there was, Alex and I only shot a little tiny bit of it, but was one of my favorite little tiny bits. Yeah. Where they go and they send the signal that the Proxima's died or whatever. So that was.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant. I know. And then most of the Maiden, I think, is episode 7, which is like one of the highlights of the season as well. That whole Maiden stuff's incredible. So final question, you're in Prague now, you're on production in season 2. I know you can't tell us what to expect, but I'm wondering, Foundation blew a lot of people's minds. Like, it was so breathtaking. We've not really seen anything like that before. Do you think season 2 will give us the same visceral reaction that season 1 gave us?
Well, geez, I hope so. I mean, the hope is it's going to be, it's going to do more of that, and maybe even more. We had a lot of sort of groundwork to lay in season 1. I think David would be the first person to admit that there was a lot of story to set up, and sometimes that can, that can take away from some of the other bits, because you got to just tell everybody what's going on. So the hope is this season people are more familiar with the story, the characters, and everything else, and now it's just driving it more emotionally than informationally, if that makes any sense. So yeah, you have to let me know once you've seen it. If you
I will. I'm really looking forward to it. I wish you could tell us all the secrets, but I don't want you to get fired, so let's just leave it at that. Thank you so much for your time, Tico. Congratulations on a really strong season 1.
Thank you very much.